I actually did a end of the year podcast, and I just kind of joked around and did a bunch of stuff. But this time, I really want to talk about what I wish I knew as a novice guitar player. There's a lot of things that I wish I knew. This is probably going to be a long podcast. Just to let everybody know, the last podcast was kind of a joke, and I was just joking around and having fun. But I wanted to do an end of the year podcast for everybody, and that was it. But this time, I actually want to start talking about. I really want to talk about what I knew, what I wish I knew as a novice guitar player. Um, there's a lot that I'm going to cover, actually. There's probably going to be a lot that I'm going to cover. This is probably going to be a part one thing. This is, there's going to be a lot of music theory in it, just to let everybody know. There's going to be a lot of music theory. I have my Les Paul set up. And I'm actually in E flat tuning, which is a half step down. I got my, I have a little, I have my tube screamer on. I have some EQ and delay. So it's all plugged into my orange amp like usual, and I'm actually playing off of that, and I want to go over some basics because it's what I wish I knew as a novice guitar player. Like the stuff that I actually, when I first started playing guitar, it wasn't actually guitar; it was bass. I started with bass, and when I started with bass, I actually the first thing I did was um, write, like, figure out what I was doing. I had to write down everything on the fretboard. I actually wrote down. I actually had a manuscript. I sat down by myself and I wrote down. I took one. I think I took one or two lessons as a novice guitar player, novice bass player, and then I started taking. When I started doing guitar, I actually started taking lessons and stuff. Um, this is back 10 years ago. Back over 10 years ago. I think it was 12 years ago when I started playing bass, and I started playing bass and I sat down. I remember I sat in my room and I played. Well, I was messing around with it for a little bit, learning some stupid songs and just playing around, and I'm like joking around with it. But the first thing I remember doing is learning how to put the strap on, learning how to tune it, and then right after learning how to tune it, I actually sat down and wrote the whole fretboard down on a manuscript. After I took about one or two lessons. I think it was before I took the lessons. I'm not even sure if it was after I took the lessons or not. I'm not even sure. It was that long ago. So I remember the first thing I did was I sat down. I took about three lessons altogether. I well, we went over octaves. Well, I actually put my finger on the root note and the octaves, and I started playing them, and it just seemed like I was just wasting my time. So I ended up teaching myself. I figured I was going to learn more by myself, but apparently I started. Well, I sat down. I wrote down the whole fretboard. I wrote down. I remember looking at E. I remember knowing it was the E, so I went to E, F, G, A, B, C, and all that. And then I started doing my sharps and my flats, and I did all that. I think it took me hours to do it. And I did all that. Started learning songs. Started learning easy songs because it was bass. And then I started playing that. And then I eventually got a new bass. And I started jamming with people. And then I ended up playing guitar. I ended up picking up the guitar. I decided I wanted to play guitar. And then I started playing the guitar. I started learning everything on the guitar. Learn the difference between the guitar and the bass. Learned all that. I actually bought my first guitar for about $60, which is very cheap. Had it had a broken um, tuner. Like it didn't. It only had 5 tuners on it. 5 locking tuners. So I had to buy a case of locking tuners, and I actually put the string and I actually put the locking tuners on. It was a Crescent. A Crescent was a cheap version of a Strat. So it was actually like a creamy Strat, a creamy colored Strat, and but it was a Crescent. It wasn't actually a Strat. Strats are very expensive, but it was very expensive. Well, it was very cheap actually. So I just bought a. I figured I would just learn how to play. I figured it was something for me to learn on, and I started learning. Eventually started. Eventually started getting better, and when I started getting better, I eventually started teaching. Um, years after this is I'm talking 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. So I've only been teaching for about a year or two. So at this time I have, and I've learned a lot with me teaching. I learned a lot about the guitar, about teaching. After I started teaching, I've actually learned a lot about the guitar. So I'm actually getting into what I wish I knew as a novice, as a beginner guitar player. Um, well, first of all, you need to make sure you're in tune. I didn't always make sure I was in tune. I just tuned up. Well, I know you have to tune up every time you make sure you. I see students that I ask them if they're in tune. They're like, "Yeah, I tuned it last week or I tuned it last night." But just because you're in tune last night, you gotta pick it up every time you pick up the guitar. You make sure you're in tune. That's what I did before I even started this podcast. Like, I started recording this podcast. I actually got up and I actually set everything up and I made sure I was in tune. This is an E flat tuning. Um, I have a tuner on my amp, so I actually use that. Um, so make sure you change your strings. I don't always do that. I mean, if you always have to make sure you're changing your strings and like normal. Um, get it set up if you need to get it set up. Always change your strings. When they feel dirt, when they're not actually in tune, like when they're after a while they get dirty and they knock you out of tune. They get real corroded. Really, I noticed that they get real corroded after a while. Um, After a while, my strings get corroded. I don't like actually playing them because they sound pretty bad. These ones I just put on. Um, I just restrung all. Actually, I just restrung 5 of my guitars. I just went and bought strings. I restrung four of my guitars and one of my basses. So I restrung that, and then my other bass, my short scale, didn't need to be restrung, so I didn't restring that. Um, I restrung my Explorer, my Les Paul, my Ibanez, and my acoustic, and my Music Man Stingray bass, and I even put a new battery in the bass because the battery was low, and you got to make sure it's all. I mean, I didn't realize what was wrong with that. I mean, the thing is, I actually just recently purchased the Music Man bass, and the thing was, I came with a new battery, and I didn't realize it. I didn't realize why the tone knobs weren't working right, and it was kind of low. The tone knobs weren't working right. It has active pickups, so you need a battery for it. And the tone knobs weren't working right, and it was just low, like you couldn't really hear it. I put in my backup bass, has passive pickups, which you don't need a battery for, and I plugged that in, and it was loud. So I was like, all right, you need a new battery. So I plugged in the battery, and it's a lot better now. So always make sure you're always make sure you're actually like keeping your guitars up to date, like with everything. If it has active pickups, you want to make sure there's a battery in there. Make sure there's a battery in there that actually works, like I did with my bass or whatever. But if you have, make sure your strings aren't always, make sure your strings aren't corroded. Make sure you have new strings every once in a while, like every month or two. Um, I have a little bit of a delay on because, well, I don't have a reverb pedal, so I just use delay. I actually enjoy just delay, just so it sounds like not so dry. I mean, I don't know. I have my strap on that I actually my stretchy strap that I use now. My stretchy straps that I use now. So I've been using them. So I have that So I have that on my Les Paul now. So it feels really comfortable. It's better than the strap that I had before because the strap that I had before was all messed up and I didn't know. It was just a $10 Ernie Ball strap, and now I have the stretchy strap, which is probably double the price, but it's worth it, I think. So yeah, it sounds pretty good because I just tuned it up and everything. Just changed the strings and tuned it up, so sounds really good. And then you also want to choose the right pick, but that'll take a while. You have to start learn how to play. You have to start playing, and you have to start like the picks that I like are 1.14. The only reason I like playing those is because I don't like the picks that bend easily. I like the picks that you can't bend, and it's just more comfortable for me. It's a regular pick, it's a regular triangle pick, and it seems a lot better for me. Just more comfortable for me to use it like that. So I use 1.14s and they're really good. But I always test your ear. Like I actually well then I wanted to go over stuff like that. How to set up your guitar. Like I want to go over how to set up your guitar and stuff. Make sure your guitar is always set up nice and. I know I went over like a maintenance thing and did all that, but I don't think I covered everything. Also, I wanted to go over a lot of other things. I wanted to go over um, what is the difference? What is like the chromatic scale? Like well, I knew I knew how there were students that um, I've run into who have I've told them like the major scale. I would tell them the major scale, the C major scale, is that's how I start students off. I start students off with the C major scale. That's the most important one to know, and it's actually got no sharps and no flats. It's the easiest and simplest thing to do. It's the simplest thing to do, so that's what I start students off with. I was starting a student off with, he was kind of older, but anyway, but I said it's the major scale. The he actually confused it with the chromatic scale, and when he confused it with with the chromatic scale, I wanted to go over the chromatic scale because, well, the chromatic scale is actually almost like a glossary defining the notes from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and your sharps. That's what the chromatic scale is. Then we have enharmonics. Then we have enharmonics that are your flats. We have the sharps that are. First, we have the sharps. First we have the glossary of the chromatic scale, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then we have our sharps, and then we have enharmonics, what are flats almost that are added onto our sharps, like saying that when you say A sharp B flat, like your A sharp is your we can go from A to A sharp to B, but your B flat is actually your enharmonic. So this is stuff that I wish I knew. I really didn't know when I first started. Also, I want to go over about um, intervals. Well, I knew it was the space in between notes. Well, I knew intervals was the space in between notes and everything. I knew stuff like, well, if you move from, hold on, I gotta find my pick. Well, if you move from, say if you move from a whole step and a half a step, I knew all that. A whole step is 2 frets and a half a step is 1 fret, and then you're gonna with the with the major, when you do it with the major scale, it's actually different with the minor scale, as in, so, um, whole thing is, if you want a step and a half, hold on, let me check. Well, step and a half is actually, um, would be 3 frets. I would always explain it as like 3 frets, but I didn't know it. I know it as a major second. Um, so the major second is actually kind of different than the minor second. When like the minor second, you want to when you hear minor second, you want to the difference between a minor second and a major second is actually you flatten the major second to create a minor second. Um, I didn't actually know stuff like that. Well, I didn't actually start knowing things like that until I actually started taking lessons and starting to get to know my theory like pretty well and everything. But I knew the root note and all that. I was getting like stuff off YouTube and everything, but wasn't really that great. Um, I learned my pentatonics before I learned my major scale, so I didn't know what actually I didn't know what a diatonic scale was. I didn't know that I knew what the major scale was, and I didn't know what the diatonic scale. I didn't know that the diatonic scale was actually the major scale. I couldn't figure it. I didn't figure that out for a long time. There's a lot of things that I didn't really know. Um, there's just a lot of music theory stuff that I actually really didn't know. Um, then I started getting those songs before I started realizing what everything was. So I would know like stuff like that. And I would just get to know everything, and I have a lot of things. It's actually about 6 in the morning right now recording this, and I can actually be loud because it's just kind of weird because before it was like all late at night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Now it's time for the guitar lesson. Um, I was gonna do a guitar lesson at the end because it's about I was gonna show you the first opening riff to "Communication Breakdown" from Led Zeppelin. Now it's not really that hard. That's why I'm actually gonna do this. It's actually pretty easy. Um, the opening riff to Led Zeppelin "Communication Breakdown" is actually you hit the it's really easy. You just hit the open E about 9 or 10 times, like. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna do a C power chord, which is you put your first finger on your third fret of the A string, which is the C note. It's a C5 power chord, and then you're gonna put your third finger on the fifth fret of the D string, and you are going to do and you're gonna hit the open well, you had to open the low E 9 or 10 times, and then you're going to hit the power chord, and then you're going to move it up to a G power chord. So what you do is when you move it up to a G power chord, you're gonna hit the C5, then you're gonna hit the G5. So it's open E, then you're gonna go back to the C5. So it's C5, G5, C5 power chords. So you're just doing that. So you just do right there. That's the opening riff to Led Zeppelin's Communication Breakdown. This is just a quick guitar lesson. Just to let you know, I do teach lessons throughout the week. On www.takelessons.com. I do teach classes. Well, teach classes throughout the week. I do have open lessons. I do have videos for you to watch up there. So that's the opening riff to Communication Breakdown. I do have a little gain on, so a little too much, I think. But it's right there. It's really easy if you put it on, put the song on, and play to it. It's not really that hard. So that's the guitar lesson. That's the podcast for what I wish I knew as a novice guitar player, and a guitar lesson at the end. So thank you.